Do it to it.
All right. Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, John, for having me today. So I work with John Blumstrand here at Minnesota Public Radio, and John has watched me do a bunch of these Visios, and interestingly enough, he thinks it makes a topic. So here we are to do this. I'm going to show you some examples that I use in engineering for planning things, keeping track of things. And I also use Visio a lot to communicate with other departments and to make things a little bit more visual, I should say, and easier to understand, especially for, we're very fortunate here where we have an operator on duty who will want to see, information, how things work. And so this is a great way to present technical stuff to people at maybe not quite a technical level the engineers operate at. And a number of, in fact, I'll start with a share here. Just bring you right in. Just going to start out with basic program here and just bring up how a new Visio would look. In fact, actually right here, first thing we should do, actually, I'm just going to, you'll probably want to do this yourself. If you Google Visio, you'll find out that it's a Microsoft product. It's part of Microsoft Office Suite. And Google does us the favor of giving us free alternatives first before actually discussing Visio. I'm going to assume that the version I'm showing you today is one of the more expensive ones, probably the Visio Professional one. It's the one I get provided with that we're licensing here and have been for years. And if you're really curious, the version is right here. Although who knows how they buy that stuff around here. I would say it's probably the professional version that we're looking at. So we're going to jump right in by going to the new screen where you would start a new drawing. And you can see here from the examples that they have immediately that mostly it's being called up as used for flowcharts and for diagrams and for things which are, pretty pictorial and not terribly detailed. Well, in fact, we've got something down here that's a rack diagram, and I've done some of those. In fact, that's the first thing I'm going to show you. But let's start out with a block diagram just to show some basic operations. So this is our create screen, and I just selected the number one thing off the top here because, like I said, really, for the most part, it seems to be more or less engaged or designed these days for doing that kind of a thing. So I got a help screen over on the side here, which I don't think I need. But let me get that out of the way, clear the desktop a little bit here. So on a drawing like this, you've got a lot of things which I think you're going to see in a normal Microsoft program, normal kinds of stuff up here, file, home. Actually have a tab here that I put in there that's just stuff that I wanted to have easy to get to. So that's just a little view construct, a little menu construct there. The most important thing about it is probably the shapes. So let's just start out by calling up some shapes, and we'll go to business, and let's go to brainstorming shapes. That sounds like fun. I don't think I've ever actually done that one. No, I don't like that one. Charts and graphs. Okay, well, that's interesting. Okay, so let's just bring something up. When you've got your shapes over on the side here, just grab one, drag it in, and there you go. So now you've seen a shape, and you can drag it in. A couple things going on here immediately. I've got my size is changing automatically. My size right now is on an 8x11 letter. So probably I usually work in 11x17. So that makes that bigger. Let's change our orientation. This is all pretty normal stuff that you would do with a spreadsheet or anything like that. And then we've got our shape here. Right now our shape is selected, and we can move it, and we can change the size of it and do all kinds of things. These are some great shapes here for that kind of thing. I'm actually going to close this, and I'm going to go make another new one. And let's do this one. basic flow chart. This is something else that you might find yourself doing when you open up one like this. Now you're getting a lot more help with what to do, and you're also getting appropriate shapes for the thing that you're going to do. And each of these shapes here can be manipulated. And one thing that these shapes will have on them, and one of the most important things about doing a lot of the things that I do, has to do with connecting shapes and making one shape connect to another regardless of where it is. So this shape here is connected to the lines that are on it. And so if I start to make this, and I would zoom out a little bit here. So if you start to get involved with things and you say, oh, well, we need another process over here, we're going to drop that in. And then we're going to go up to home here. We're going to grab a connector, which is the thing that you would use to connect something. And we're going to make a connector. We're going to go from here to here. And then we can go to the shape and we can say, give it some information and type in whatever we want. And you can then add some lettering to that. And of course, you can do anything you want that you normally do in a Microsoft program. You can change the color of the lettering. You can make it bigger. You can make it smaller. You can change the font. You can do all kinds of fun stuff to your shape. We'll select it again here. You can also do things to any of your shapes. You can rotate them. Then as you rotate them, they do fun stuff like this. And here's another shape that will rotate. Whee! So this is pretty, one of the most important things that I do is taking shapes, connecting them up, and going from one to another. So let's take an actual example of something I've been working on. Let's see what we can do here. Which one do we want to start with? Let's start with this one. So here's something that we engineer types are going to quite frequently do, and that is figure out racks. So this is a bunch of rack diagrams. This is one I actively use. This happens to be our equipment that we have at the PRSS NOC in DC, and I'm able to color code things. So this one is pretty basic. You have the ability to copy and paste, once again, just as you would do with any normal Microsoft program. So for instance, if I wanted to start with a new rack, I can just take all these numbers here. I can do a Control-C to copy them. I can go over here, do a paste, and then I can start, making a brand new rack. The boxes and things you put on here are in layers. And if you've done anything with Photoshop, you understand that you can make many layers of things. You can look at layers in different ways. So for instance, here's a box that's the back of the rack. I can do a copy paste on that. Now I've got a new version of that. I can move that over here, and then I'm off and running on creating a new rack diagram. And that kind of thing, you'd fairly well expect to be able to do any one of those things. You can change for instance, you can change aspects of the line that goes around this shape. So I can make the outside of the line, outside of the rack, very heavy. Now I'm varying some of my numbering over here, so I can take the shape and I can highlight it and I can send it to the back. I can bring it back to the front. You can do things like that, so that you have to kind of be conscious of what layer something is in. If I select this thing here and I send it to the back, it basically disappears. I bring this rack up here to the front, everything disappears, move the background thing to the back, and there we go. We're back to where we started. So back to front, this is real important. You can do things if you have a series of a bunch of shapes, you can auto align them. You can take a bunch of things together and move them around, and maybe we'll get to a little bit of that. There's styles. I don't usually do much with styles. Most of what's going on really is right in this area right here, which is your pointer tool, which is how you select things, your connector tool, which is how you hook things together, text tool, which in this case highlights, so you can put text on this thing right here into this box. Once again, you can make it bigger and you can move it around. Normal, just stuff you'd already be doing with your spreadsheets and things like that. The Microsoft ones, you can do any of that kind of thing that you'd expect to be able to do. So that in itself makes it pretty powerful for presenting things. This right here is an 11 by 17, and it prints out very, very nice. Makes a great PDF too. A couple other things here that make the program harder or easier to do, to use. I'm going to go to view settings here. I like to use a grid. And so here I've turned the grid off, but I can turn the grid back on. And there's rulers and other things that are happening. And one other thing I'll point out right here is something called glue and snap. So for instance, if I go and I make a rectangle, so let's just draw ourselves a little rectangle here. There we go. Now, if you watch as I'm doing this, if I resize this, this is going to want to go to the grid. So as I move it, it kind of sticks right there, and I can always drop it right in on one of those grid lines. So that's called snap. And there's some detailed settings in there about how strong that snap and glue is, but it helps you keep your shapes aligned. And on a schematic, if you're doing something like that, is pretty important. The other thing is glue. So shapes will want to glue together. So if I have two of these boxes and I take another one, they will glue together edge to edge, which is real helpful for building things. You can turn off glue and snap, but that's really, one of the things. But when you got a grid up and you've got some glue and some snap, then you can, make things line up and go together really nicely, which is a great tool, but you do have complete control over that. Let's go back over to shapes here. Now, this shape was started out as I believe I went and did new, and then did, what did I, basic electricity. And I think I started out this way. So it came with some shapes, which we're seeing over here. And these are, this is titled Semiconductors and Electron Tubes. Tubes, I love tubes. Remember tubes, Mark? When we go over here to shapes, this version I have comes with all kinds of different shapes here. And so for instance, in engineering, there's electrical engineering, and then here's all the things that you can see shape-wise over on your shape box on the left-hand side there for electrical engineering. And I happen to have all these checked ones here open. But one of the things I also do a lot with this, or I do quite frequently, is make my own shapes. And so there's a section for that. And do I have any of my own shapes up here? I do not. So let's bring up some of my own shapes. I work with a lot of chassis where we use D connectors. So I've put together some shape files that have D connectors in them. So for instance, I can take a D connector like this. So this is a big one, 37. This is a connector that I drew using the basic drawing tools. And then I, right from the drawing, right from here, took it and moved it over into one of my own built shape sections over here. And then I'm able to bring this out and use it anytime I want to. And it's very, very easy to do this. So for instance, here's a shape. This is just a box, but I can turn this into a shape that I can then use on any drawing I want. So I can just bring it over, drop it in, ask if you want to make the stencil editable, and takes a second. This is the online version. The old version that lived in the computer was a lot faster. Oh, you know what? I've got this set of shapes open in another Visio, so I can't add to this one. But because this is in a drawing, this shape is also open, but you can, let me see, can I just do a brand new one? Anyway, I think you get the idea there. Let's do a new, no, we're not going to do that. But anything you draw out here can be grabbed. For instance, I didn't really show this. I mean, select is what you'd expect. You can select part, or you can select more, or you can select all. And you can also select this whole thing. If I were to have just drawn this and I wanted this to be a new shape that was available, I would just grab it this way and just drag it over, and the stencil will go to editable. We would make a new little box here, and it would allow me to change the name on it. So that's a really handy thing, making your own shapes, and something that I do a lot. So let's move on to a different drawing. Which one do we want to do next here? Let's do this one. So this is a schematic I'm working on right now. And this happens to be for a project where we're going to be interfacing with a lot of different codecs in this case. So I've started out by drawing in my connectors. These connectors will be on the back of the chassis, and each of these chassis pins then has got a something that's dedicated to a relay number. Zoom in a little bit here, and there we go. So you can change, the lettering, obviously, with the sideways. I've got two sets of tags here. I've got one set that's just for what the pins are, and then I've got up here a description of what each pin does. And I've started to lay these out here. In fact, John, I think, is going to be building this chassis if things go as planned, so that's nice. So then you've got to hook things together, and I've got a situation here where I would like to run some connections from over here to over to this where the Burke relay connector is going to go and hook up to my my Burke chassis. So I can just go up here and grab a connector. These are all things I've made. Now this right here appears to just be a little dot, but actually as you see me floating around this little dot, you can see those little gray spots pop out of it, and those are connection points. So if I back up so I can see, come on, computer, it's stalling out on me here. Oh boy, like I said, the version that lived in your computer was a lot better than this online version. Anyway, so I can see enough here. I want to make some new wires. So they're going to start out being really super messy, but I know that this wire here, well, I don't know it for sure it goes there, but we'll put it there for now, just for argument. And let's put this one, let me see, I don't need one there. I need one here. We're going to put this over here. We're going to put this one over here. Well, anyway, they start out being really messy. The computer program just drops them in randomly. Obviously, you don't want them to stay there. So you grab your pointer tool, and we'll just get them in a nice order here. So I'm going to start there, drag this one down to here, and that snaps in. So the distances here are the same. I can't see all the way to the fine grid lines here, but it snaps it in a nice place. So the next one I want to put here, the next one order is that one. We'll drag that down to there. Also snaps it in a super nice place there. And see if we can do the same thing with that one. Great. And then the little, even though we're backed way out, we still got little dots here and little handles. So if we're going to do these in order, we'll take this one, move that over there. And so a fairly sizable schematic becomes manageable by just learning some of the tricks that it will do. And so now we got these lines laid out. Other things that are on this drawing. So this right here is a little Teco PLC, program logic controller, smart relay, whatever you want to call it. This is a little set of things that I drew that actually emulate the device. So this is a representation on the drawing of this device that I'm going to use. And in this case, I've gone in, whoops, and put in little circles to represent the screws. And then on each one of these little things here, there's a little connecting point. So I can just go right there, and then I can make my wire off of that. When we start connecting these up, I got a couple of these on here. So let us, seeing as this is an active drawing, close, and don't save that. I do not want all that mess on there. All right. So, well, actually, you know what? I want to show you more on that one. Sorry. let's go back. Yeah, here we go. That's this one. Open it up again here. I think it's this one. Yeah, it is. Okay. There's some other things that I've made on this one. So for instance, this is an opto-isolator. I drew that. I drew this shape up here, and now it lives over here in some of my stuff that I did. Let me see, favorites. Is that it? Yeah, I think it's right over here in these. Yeah, there it is right there. So I drew this years ago. It's an opto-isolator I use, and I can bring it out now anytime I want to and put it on a drawing. This is a new one I just did. This right here is a 4-pole, well, it's a 4 double pole double throw relay, or a 4-pole double throw relay, and it's one of those ones that's on a little block. But anyway, I've just made it visually what the thing does, just to make it easier to sort out once you actually start building the chassis. And once again, all these little points here where you don't want to put a wire, you can hook a connector right on and run it to another thing that has a connector and move that around. This is a multi-page drawing. So just like a Microsoft spreadsheet, you can put multiple pages in. So here's a large scale logic diagram of this particular one, just showing some of the things, some of the interactions between other parts of the system. I was basically just drawing the part that brings all these things together here, but we've got another part here at another location. I just want to keep track of logic flow. This just has to do with how brakes and alarms and things like that flow around. I've got a couple of habits. One of them is making a page in a complicated drawing like this called subassemblies. So this just helps me sort out what I'm drawing on the larger drawing. And also just helps you, when you get into a real big drawing, if you've got something that is contiguous, but is then spread out in the drawing, it's nice to put it here. And then the other thing is, like, for instance, if I build up something like this, like for instance, this connector right here is a 26-pin connector on the back of Gates Air codec. Well, I mean, I've built up the codec, I've named all of the connectors, or all the pins, I should say, and now here I've also added in some names for what those pins and those contacts do. So I can take this out of my first drawing and just copy that. And then I've actually pasted, I think, even that one right into here. I changed it around a little bit, but you can start it out on one drawing where you're, thinking, what's my strategy going to be, and then move it into the larger drawing. And here's some other things where I just been kind of goofing around. Now we're loading. There we go. This is another drawing. This is just of a cable. So a couple of resistors in here so I can do some pull-ups on using some Burks for meter readings. But this takes this 26-pin cable and it breaks it down. I used to solder on these 26-pin connectors. This is a 15 size shell with an extra row in the middle. And I just decided I didn't want to do that anymore as much as possible. So what I did is I went out and bought a cable that's got the end on it, right? So it's got this end, and I put the color scheme in it, and then I can cut the cable and then just take the individual colored wires and move those out onto the pins here. So part of what's going on there. Let's see, page 6. Yeah, just another example of that. You can, like for instance, I can add a page. So let's make a new page right here. Let's go back to this page 6 where I just was kind of noodling, and I can just take this whole thing right here. I can copy it, and then I can go over to my new page that I just made, this blank, and I can paste it in. And then I can take the whole mess and move where I want it to go and drop it, and then start making changes to it. So once again, that whole edit or copy, paste, edit thing that you're used to is fully applied here and becomes really useful. And this is a shape of a connector that I made. And if I've decided that that connector should be over here, I just grab it, move it, all the connections go with it, which is super nice. So a drawing like that eventually can turn into a drawing more like this. And this is a completed, this is something like that one I was just showing you is going to look eventually with all the lines drawn in. It's nice to have a lot of white space around things so that you can, easier to track things. Now, of course, with that many lines on a page, it can be a real drag to actually do the wiring. So in this case, if I were going to start wiring this, what I would do is I would have the live page open, and then you can click on one of your wires and you can see from the way it highlights what it does. So for instance, you can then see that this particular wire, as hard as it might be to trace through the whole drawing, this isn't even a good example. You can say, well, that's going on pin 19 over here, and it's going down to pin 10, 9, 10 over here on this opto-isolator. And that really helps when you get into a mess like this over here, where all this stuff is so close. And so here you can say, well, yeah, we're going to go from pin on that relay over to the pin on this connector here. So having the drawing available and having a live version of it is really helpful to do that kind of thing. It helps sort this sort of thing out when you're trying to do something a little bit more complicated like that. So there we go. So then the other thing I've used it for a lot. So schematics, flow diagrams, maps of how different equipment fits together. In fact, let's see here. One, I guess which one would that be? Codec map here. Here we go. So this is actually a PDF I made. You make easy PDFs out of these, then they're easy to show to people. So here's a bunch of codecs that act together, and you're able to add as many details as you want to, put in lines. This gets handed off to a lot of different people just so they know that, well, gee, if you're over in Marketplace LAB on codec 1, you're actually connected over here to DC codec B2. So that gives a visual indication of that stuff. And that PDF, once again, is a great way to look at these. So the other thing that you can do that I've found equally useful to schematics is you can do things with buildings. And so there's a whole set of architectural features to it. And so it comes, in fact, we can look at shapes here. We can go to another set of shapes. Let's see here, maps and floor plans. So you can do a building plan, and there's all kinds of different things here that you can use to put into a building plan. And one that I use quite a bit is office furniture. In fact, office furniture is open on this drawing, so maybe we'll drop in some office furniture. This particular drawing, which has got a lot of tabs on it, we'll go through some of these, is used for a studio plan that we did a couple of years ago. And I started by taking a piece of our building plan, the blueprints. And so this part in the background right here, this kind of grade, that's actually a photograph of the blueprint of the building. And then what I did is I drew over it so that then I have lines that I've drawn that I can manipulate to use to make the studio design. And so you just draw over the top of it so that you've got nice square flat lines. And if I go over here just to show office furniture. So for instance, if you want to know how big a chair is in this room, you can go over here, grab desk chair, and drop it in. In fact, I've got one of those right here. And the only difference between these two is that I just changed the fill on it and changed the line on it so that it looks different. It kind of fades into the background. But even a shape that you've pulled from the Visio chart, or from the shapes shape table over here, you can bring that in and you can manipulate it. So now this drawing here is not to scale. This chair came in a little bit big, but these Visio shapes are super nice, and then you can just change them, just make them bigger, make them smaller. Making a shape like this is really complicated, but it can be done with the program. You can make something that's just as easy to manipulate. A lot of times, a lot of my drawings that I make, those connectors and things, I've tried to change the size of them. They do weird things. But this particular one here is made by a professional, and it's really good. And another thing worth pointing out is that these shapes are produced, there's kind of a whole ecosystem for this. And so shapes are produced by different companies, like for instance, APC. If you go to search APC Visio, I think you'll probably find that they have a bunch of Visio files that they give away. And they're pictures of their gear that you can use in Visio to do planning drawings, which is really handy. And I don't know whether this is still developed as much as it used to be, but a lot of companies do that. Let's look at some more tabs here. So this is where this planning started on this studio, was with just this basic blueprint, putting some lines on it. So then I started thinking, what else do I need to do here? Well, the studio needs some wiring. So this is audio schematic, and this is an Axia studio, so that really simplifies things. And so basically you're just running network wires, mic lines, and connections between devices. But to make sure you got enough ports and everything, you can maybe do a drawing like this. And these rooms are relatively simple: a few microphones, a couple of nodes, you got a fusion console. This gives you a place to put all of your addresses, and basically gives you one sheet that if you go to it, you'll be able to sort out what's going in the room pretty quickly. You can look at the node and say, X port is doing X thing. And in this case, they all fit pretty nicely onto one page, which is good. Here's a rack elevation. So this is how all the racks got laid out. We've got 4 rooms, 3 A, B, C, D, and 2 racks per room, each room doing something different. Here's another type of schematic. This is an I/O panel that John built, that I put together. And we're doing some things here on this I/O panel where you can plug something in the room that you bring with you. I'll just point this out because this is interesting, and I'm sure a lot of you know about this. You can plug a cell phone into this rack, and it will act as your codec, because I've got a 4-pin connector plug in here, and it actually works pretty well. As long as phones have a 4-pin jack on them, you can plug that in and actually use that as your phone codec if you want to. And here, I'm not representing a lot of detail. Each one of these lines here is an RJ45 cable. It's got multiple wires in it, but it once you're working with Axia, you're working with that Studio Hub standard, then you know what all these things do. And this makes it nice and visual, makes it easier to sort out. I made some drawings for specific things. This was just describing how we were going to get speaker wires up to the rails. The speakers hang over the top. Here's one I did for low volt and for electrical, just to call out where things are happening in these rooms. And then here's table design. So this was really the main part of the design in each one of these rooms, was the table that was made for it. And so I was able to draw this, and this is where Visio allows you to do some things that a lot of programs don't. This drawing is to scale. And so you can give your drawing a scale. Right here, it's 1:12. This is on a 11:17 page. And so if you print this out on 11:17, we print them on our HP printers, you can actually, with a scale, take measurements off of it, which is can be real handy. The other thing is you can make a drawing and just say, oh, I like that shape, but how big is it? Well, maybe you don't know. So you can go over here to your dimensional architecture tools, and you can say, well, let's just take a measurement of how far it is from right there to up there. And your dots and things, your endpoints are going to snap, and they're going to sit right on things. And then that is 2'6" and 1/4 inches, and you can pretty well count on that. For this kind of a drawing, one thing that's real handy is you can take a line drawing, and if you can take lines, and you can make a line, and then you can, if you do it all at once, you can make this line into a single shape. And so this table shape is kind of complicated, but if you take your lines and you draw a shape and you hook the ends together, then you actually get a shape that you can manipulate at that point. So you can change where these points are. And in the case of this table, I drew something similar to this, which was just very square. And then I went over to my line effects. I will select this. Oops, I selected it twice, and let me put letters on it. And I can look at my line attributes, and this is a really cool thing that it does for this particular part of what I've done. You can round everything. So now I've taken this shape, I've gone over here to my format shape area and rounded it. So now that desk shape has, or that odd looking square shape has become something a little easier to work with. And I can go and still manipulate this. So if I highlight this and I go and use my line tool, now I can still move my endpoints. So now I can still manipulate the shape of that thing. There are some limitations here. Sometimes you get frustrated and you just got to start over. But doing an odd shaped desk like this becomes pretty easy with those kinds of tools. So I've got different table drawings in here. We work with Carl Berndt, who I'm sure many of you know. And Carl and I have kind of got a language worked out where I give him something that's got this much detail on it. He somehow is able to make it into something, which is great. But obviously, you can add as much detail as you want to. Part of the discussion we were having at our end here about how this is going to go together is what height is the keyboard? There was kind of a big deal about that. So I did a little study of keyboard. I drew a little guy here. I drew a little chair. And then you're able to say, well, we can have our keyboard height at such and such. And then we're actually using little trays so that the keyboard sits on a tray that's down from the tabletop, and so forth. And you can see that again, not here so much. Table B, this cutout that I showed there is actually right here on the table. So this is a tray which sits down below the main tabletop. And you see that right here with this difference between tabletop and keyboard tray. So anyway, and it's a great way to communicate. I mean, I was offered CAD when I started here. I started working on Visio, and I started to try to learn CAD, and which is the other thing that you would learn, and another way to obviously do pretty much any of this. This is so much easier, and it becomes so much more graphical, and easier to communicate. It becomes a better communication tool, I think, than CAD, especially for things like this, because anybody can relate to that. So I've got this third floor studio project. This is a pretty big project for us. And I'm going to end pretty much to talk about Visio right there. And I'm just going to quickly go to another tool and show you something which you might be familiar with, which is called SketchUp. Oh, it just disappeared on me. Where is it? Here we go. Come on, SketchUp. Where'd you go? Great. All right, here we are. So SketchUp is like Visio in some ways, but it is a 3D version of Visio. So I was able to take this drawing here and then use this for the basis of a Visio drawing. And so it's basically the same space, but now we're 3D. And I still use both of them, even on a project like this, because this, you don't really, it's really hard to generate accurate drawings like for those table shapes and things. But what this does is, once again, it's a communication tool. And a lot of the work we did in these studios and some other rooms happened during the pandemic. So I got a bunch of people who are Zooming like this, and they want to know, well, what's going to be like if I'm sitting in that room? So you can do that. And I've added a lot of things here. This is another program where you can pretty much draw the shape you want. So I built up an Axia board, and I built up some mic arms and some microphones. And then I took these table shapes. These are direct copies from the two-dimensional drawing. And then I've got a rack here, and these racks are essentially copies of what was also on the two-dimensional drawing. And then when you do it this way, people get a chance to actually see what it's like. And if I can take some camera shots I have, and then we can do a pan and zoom through a number of different positions. Now I still got that tabletop highlighted, so it's red, but this way people can get an idea, what's it like to be in the room? What are the sight lines over into the other room? The studios operate as pairs. Over on the side there, I've got all the junk that I was constructing out there in that area there. So now we're going to enter the studio at the other end, and we're going to make a turn here, and we're going to see, so what is my sight line if I'm working with somebody, with a producer in that other room there. So that's nice. The other nice thing about this, and something that that Visio doesn't do, that makes this very easy to use, is this allows layers. And I mentioned layers. Layers exist in Visio, obviously, but they're harder to manipulate. So where's my here's my layers. So I don't have any doors on my things here. I took the doors and put them into layers. So here's open doors. So now you can see the doors in the rooms. And then I can also have closed doors. So now you can see what it's like when the doors are closed. One exercise I engaged in for these studios was, where will the mic arms go? Where can you stand and be on mic? So I built these spheres around the mics. So then you can look kind of down on here, and you can look sideways, and you can say, well, this mic is easy to use sitting here. This one's sitting here. This one actually could go all the way over here. So that was, I don't know exactly why I did that. I don't think it really proved much, but it shows the flexibility of SketchUp. And I think I'm done. There you go. So, do we generate any questions?
Yeah, I have one. How much or how many times did you have to build your own electronic components for the drawings?
I did a lot of them. I mean, you can, when you look at the shapes that are available here, there's a lot of them. I mean, there's somebody's idea of what they're supposed to look like. Like for instance, I've taken this inductor, and I've taken this inductor, and I think I've what? That's weird.
That's the Visio I remember.
Yeah. What the heck? Seriously, why is it doing that? I don't know. But I think it's that one that I've used as a coil and a relay that I built. And there's a diode version here, which I've used as a LED. Now, are all these shapes going to do that? Yeah, they really suck.
Are you zoomed in too far?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's there's some version differences. It's been a while since I pulled something out of here. And it may have something to do with having Zoom operating right now and having SketchUp up. I've got a lot going on the machine here. Let's close this. And that didn't help too much. I don't know what's going on with this one. Let's whip out something else here. Okay, here's something else off a different page. Well, they're all doing that right now. And sometimes you've got to change the fill or the line. Wow, you know what? You just exposed the vast underbelly of Microsoft's bugs. I mean, a lot of these probably got to do a close and open. Turn it off.
Bill,
Start
does
it
it have
over again.
does it have something to do with the drawing type? Because you were on the floor diagram of 3A, B, C, and D, but yet it wasn't electronic. Does that make a difference?
That could be it. So let's just do a new blank here. Let's start over again. All right, there's a blank one. Go to engineering, electrical engineering. I think that was fundamental items. And okay, so there's the 2013 version. And then there's electrical engineering, other fundamental items. So this is the one we just tried to grab right here. Was this inductor? And okay, thank you very much, John. I think you're correct. That was a style issue. Yeah. But I know that I've used this coil on a couple of things. And this, once again, made by Visio, shrinks and gets bigger and smaller really easily. There's a, like I said, there's a diode that I grabbed and used. But after you get used to it, making your own stencils, they're called, is pretty easy.
Hey,
Anything
Bill?
else?
Yeah, Bill, Mike Ostlund.
Hey.
Great presentation. Nice to see you guys again. And go back if you can. I've got a number of drawings where I'm trying to connect multiple connections to a device. And I've got connections going all over the place, and they don't want to sit where they're supposed to. And if I have 3 or 4 connections on a device that I need to go to another device or to split them out, for example, it's like I can't get them to stay where I want them to go.
Sure. And that is a big problem. So because of glue and snap, if I take just 2 drawings and I say I want to draw from this one to this one, it makes a line in a pretty arbitrary place. And if I grab this and move it, you know, the line, well, in this case, it's staying, well, no, it isn't. See over there, it moved, it connected to a different spot. So then what you do is you go up here to this little X guy up here, and on this highlighted shape, I push down the control key and I can add a connection point. Well, I added that connection point and that line snapped over to it. Let's put a connection point here, and put a connection point here. So now I've got 4 connection points on that shape. And let's do the same thing over here, put a couple over here, we'll put one. Now we'll highlight it first, hit control key, add a connection there, add a connection there. So now, as it turns out, it was willing to connect to shape, but now it is connected to connection point. So if I go in here and put another one here, now I've got that, what I was showing before, where I can take this thing and spin it, and the connections stay with the same position on the object. And I think maybe that's the problem you're having. Wow, Jay just lost one of them. What the heck? What happened there?
Yeah, and the other thing that I was trying to do is I was trying to put, okay, so can you have 2? So if you take that square box, can you put 2 connectors on the same side? Can you put one right underneath of it, or does that matter?
You can connect. Well, in fact, this box, of course. So I put in one.
If I wanted 4 connections, say, or let's just make it 3 on one side of that box.
Yeah. So you can do that. You can use a connection point for multiple things. So my lines are disappearing there because I had made them just to shape connections. So here, if I can take 3 of these lines and connect them all there. Now, the program itself is starting to draw them into one place, but I can separate each one of them out and make them distinct. Now, these 2 lines here are now on top of each other, so you can't see the difference. So what you need to do is highlight one end, and now I can manipulate this one individually, pull that apart from the other one, and then I should be able to move the shape and the lines stay where they're connected. 3 at this end and then 3 different places over here. And let's really test it and see what it does there. As soon as you start moving them, they start to conjoin, but you can always highlight them and pull them apart like this. Does that help, Michael?
It does. It does. Thank you very much.
All right. Anything else? That went longer than I thought. I think it just chewed up the whole hour here.
Great stuff, Bill. And you made reference to a tube earlier in the talk, and that's analog technology, you understand.
Yeah, you need a lot more wires to describe that and lots of capacitors. Yeah, we still have some tubes. Anything else before I hand it back over to the bosses here?
Anyone?
I was gonna say, thank you, Bill. That was interesting.
My pleasure. Thank you. All right, then I'll be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.